So who is it that speaks now? Who? When a dog barks, who is it that's barking? We say in the human world it's the dog that barked. Like the dog is barking. That's the way that we name things. That's the way that we put words to action. The dog barked. The dog is barking. But who actually is creating the impulse in the dog to bark? Who's actually instructing that action? So who's at the source of that action? So we've also been taught in our society that there is a soul inside the body. Now that's not the sole of someone's foot. We don't have someone's foot inside our body. I know English is very confusing and most of you assume that I meant a foot, but that's not what our society means. Our society means soul as in some sort of ethereal spirit that lives inside the body and goes on after the body. And when the body dies, that spirit or soul will go into heaven and knock on the gates and ask God if that soul has been good enough to get into heaven. And God looks through a big book of actions. It goes through it. It's like and then comes to the conclusion whether that soul goes to heaven or hell. And if it goes to hell, then the soul is stuck there for eternity. If it goes to heaven, it's there for eternity. And that's what we've been taught in our society. Very logical, makes a lot of sense. Just to clarify again, when I speak about soul, I'm not talking about a foot. I'm talking about this ethereal spirit. So we got taught that in our society. And so we believe when the dog barks, that inside the dog there is a soul making that action happen. So there is a soul dog, a spirit dog inside the dog going, and that soul has free will and is independent from everything else and walks around through its own choice. And that's what we think of the humans as well. We think of that of every moving object. We don't think of that trees have souls unless you're a pagan, or grass has soul. It tends to only be the animals which move fast enough for us to see, or what we define as animals. So non-duality has a different perspective. Non-duality doesn't really buy into the idea of soul or spirit. It suggests the idea that every action that happens, everything that appears is God or life or the universe's will and not an individual entity's will. Funny enough, science begins to back that up as well. Science begins to say that that we don't end at the edge of our body. Nothing actually begins and ends. That everything is made up of atoms, and it's the lining up and the different movement of the atoms that creates all this. And inside the atoms, there's smaller particles, quarks and protons and neurons, and then inside of that there is a mystery. Inside of that they can't find anything. But science also indicates that there isn't something that begins and ends inside this body. They've never found a soul, they've never found a separate individual. In fact, a lot of science says that individuality is an illusion created by the brain. But most humans believe in this thing called soul, spirit that goes to heaven after death, that there's something in there that's separate and creating it. And that's what's propagated by most religions, Christianity, the big ones, Christianity and Islam and Judaism, all traditionally teach about this soul. But if you go deeper into it, they begin to debunk this idea of soul. It's just the more popular, common idea. So a scientist would look at the dog and say that it's a lot of it's energy making the dog bark. It's everything that's lined up in a particular way that's affected by everything else that's creating the dog to bark. And that's also what non-duality would say as well. However, this is very abstract to a lot of people. So the science would imply, and non-duality imply, there isn't actually free will of a separate entity inside the dog. The dog is barking because it's a mechanism that's appearing, and the creation of that comes from everything, the whole entire universe. So the dog barking is formed from the Big Bang, from the dinosaurs, from everything that's ever happened. There is particles that's inside that dog creating, in that particular moment, a particular reaction, which is and that it's not an individual entity doing it. And that's the same with humans. So you might think that you're somebody, a separate entity sitting inside your body, listening to me speak, but that is simply what you think. It's a very, very strong illusion that the humans are in. The dog actually doesn't think that she's an individual inside the body howling, and I'll tell you why, which is very obvious, but a lot of people will argue with this. The dog doesn't think. If the dog doesn't have language, it cannot think. I remember saying this to a close relative. I since learned that you never talk about this stuff with close relatives. You tend to just talk about it with people that are interested. And I remember just saying to this relative, but how could the dog do that? The dog doesn't think. They're like, of course the dog thinks. How would it do anything? I think the dog can have limited imagination, but it can't think, because what would it think in? Your thinking is predominantly in words with images. But imagine if you just had solely images. So the dog had to picture everything that happened, like it pictures where the bone is, which is fair enough, but how would it know? So if it did everything in pictures and had a strong imaginary world, which I don't think it does, but it obviously has some form of imagining. But even if it does do that, how does it think I am somebody inside this body? How does it know that? Images won't tell it that. It doesn't recognize itself when it looks in the mirror. It doesn't think, oh, that's me. How would it know or think that it's me? You see, the human has this amazing ability to think, and then it gets lost in thinking and thinks, yes, I am somebody that is listening to Lisa talk, but it's only what you think. What is your actual experience? And your actual experience is that there is not a thing listening to Lisa. There is simply listening and speaking happening for no one. That's your actual experience. That's like the truest part that you can get to. Everything else is thoughts that come and go, but your actual experience is that you're not listening to me. The you that you think yourself to be is something that comes and goes, and it's not actually you. Who you are is everything, which is nothing. You're not even consciousness experiencing everything, because consciousness isn't separate from everything. Everything is self-conscious. It's an illusion that you're looking from a particular angle. It feels like it because you're having a human experience, but actually when you really, 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 really relax as that separate entity, you begin to see that there isn't a position of looking, there is simply everything experiencing itself. Isn't that fantastic? Some might agree, and some might be like, yeah, so what does that give me? All right then, so I buy that, Lisa. It seems like you have some truth, but, you know, at the end of the day, what does that give me? Nothing. It gives you jack shit, except it is absolute freedom. But it doesn't give you anything because you don't exist. And who you are, that thing you think you're going to get, isn't a thing, it's everything. So you could say you can't get anything. And this is absolute freedom. Nothing in life will ever work out. It will work out for a period, but it won't ever be permanent. So you'll get things, you'll lose things, you'll get things, you'll lose things, you'll stick flags here. And then you'll lose those flags, then you'll forget about the flags, then you'll find them again in the basement and be like, oh, there's a flag. Oh, we'll stick it here. And it all comes and goes and comes and goes and comes and goes and comes and goes and comes and goes. But it won't actually work out. Your imagination, your thought process is always believing that one day you're going to arrive at a place and things are going to work out, that people are going to stop dying, that there's going to be peace on earth, that we're going to invent eternal life, that there's never going to be blood, there's never going to be bacteria or anything gross, that everybody will stop going to the toilet and go for a poo, and weeing will not exist either, and sex will be a very clean thing. You can have sex with everybody and there'll be no STDs, or you can just have sex with one person and that one person will always be trustworthy and do exactly what you say. But it's unlikely that that's going to be the way it is, because everything always changes. It changes. You know, it changes. But isn't it fantastic? On the human level, on the thought level, none of us know why we're alive. We simply are experiencing this. And when you remember who you are, that aliveness is just ecstatic to be. Who you are, God, is not in rejection of itself. It's totally intimate with itself. It's only the person that rejects and likes. And when you're totally identified with that, then life is heaven and hell. Mostly hell for a lot of people, especially as they get past 40 and their parents, when their parents begin to die. And that generation begins to die and they begin to become the older one and they've got like 5 kids and bills. I like to sing a song which explains the nature of the universe. It's not about bajang, but you could put it in the category of bajangs, but just English bajangs. But we wouldn't call it bajangs because it's in English, so we would just call it a song. So I have a repetitive song that I like to sing, and I think it's very profound. And if you'd like to join me in this prayer, then I'm sure it will get you enlightened. It goes a little like this. I got a little ee-ee, I got a little ooh. I got a little ee-ee, I got a little ooh. And basically what it means is I've got a little ee-ee, I got a little ooh. And that means nothing. It's absolutely pointless, just like the nature of life. I got a little ee-ee, I got a little ooh. I got a little ee-ee, I got a little ooh. Khaleesi particularly likes dancing to it. She tends to wiggle her little bottom.